The alien delegation stood frozen in the council chamber as the human engineer knelt beside the shattered remains of their most sacred relic. Commander Jake Morrison watched the Velcor ambassador's facial tendrils twitch with barely controlled rage. "You will fix this," Ambassador Krenth hissed, his translator crackling with static. "Your species broke the eternal sphere. You will restore it." Jake didn't look up from the fractured crystalline fragments scattered across the polished floor. His scanner hummed as it analyzed the molecular structure. Behind him, Lieutenant Carla Price stood ready, her hand near her sidearm. The tension in the room could ignite plasma. "We didn't break it," Jake said calmly. "Your cub did." Krenth's 6 arms trembled. "Lies. Human sabotage. This sphere has survived 10,000 cycles. It cannot simply break." Jake finally stood, meeting the ambassador's triple-eyed gaze without flinching. "It broke because it was designed to break. Look at the fracture patterns. This wasn't an accident. Your ancestors built a failure point into every joint. The chamber erupted." Velcor advisors shrieked in their clicking language. The human diplomatic team shifted nervously. Captain Alan Brooks stepped forward from the observation platform, his jaw tight. "Explain," Krenth demanded. "Now." Jake tapped his scanner, projecting a holographic model of the sphere's internal structure. "See these stress concentrations? They're intentional. Someone engineered this to shatter under specific pressure. The exact pressure a young Velcor's grip would apply." "Impossible," Krenth spat. "The eternal sphere represents our species' triumph over entropy, our greatest achievement." "It represents a test," Carla interrupted, her voice sharp. "One your people apparently forgot about." Krenth's tendrils went rigid. "You will repair it. Immediately. Toward the alliance between our species ends. Tonight." The threat hung heavy. Humanity needed the Velcor navigation charts. The war with the Drex Collective was draining Earth's resources. Losing this alliance meant losing the outer colonies. Jake picked up the largest fragment, turning it slowly in his hands. Light refracted through the crystal's core, revealing patterns invisible to the naked eye. Ancient symbols. A message. "No," Jake said quietly. The room went silent. "What did you say?" Krenth's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Jake looked at the ambassador, then at the Velcor cub trembling behind its parent's legs. The small creature's skin had gone pale with fear. "I said no." Jake's voice was steady, final. "I won't fix it." Krenth lunged forward, stopped only by Captain Brooks stepping between them. "You dare refuse? Your entire species will suffer for this insult." Jake smiled then, cold and knowing. He held up the fragment so everyone could see the symbols glowing within. "You want to know what your ancestors wrote inside this thing? What message they hid where only the breaking would reveal it?" The Velcor delegation went completely still. Jake's eyes blazed with something ancient and terrifying. They wrote, "Leave it broken." The silence shattered when Krenth's senior advisor, an elderly Velcor named Sesseth, collapsed to the floor. Her breathing apparatus wheezed as she stared at the glowing symbols within the crystal fragment. "The old tongue," she whispered. "I have not seen it since I was newly hatched." Jake knelt beside her, holding the fragment closer so she could read. Captain Brooks kept his position between Jake and Krenth, but the ambassador had gone motionless, his tendrils hanging limp. "Translate it," Krenth commanded. "All of it." Sesseth's manipulator limbs traced the symbols in the air, her voice trembling. "When the young one breaks what cannot break, when the eternal proves temporary, know this truth. Strength that cannot bend will always shatter. Let the breaking teach what preservation never could." Carla moved to Jake's side, her scanner active. "There's more. The fragments are resonating with each other. They're forming a network." Jake carefully placed fragments together, not repairing them but arranging them in a specific pattern. Each piece began to glow brighter, and new symbols appeared in the spaces between the shards. "Your ancestors were brilliant," Jake said, his voice filled with respect now. "They didn't create a relic. They created a lesson that could only be learned through loss." Krenth's youngest advisor, a Velcor barely past maturity, spoke up. "The cub trials. The ancient texts mention them, but we thought they were metaphorical. They were real, Seseth said, struggling to her feet. Before we became the Velcor Empire, before we conquered 40 star systems, we were different. We taught through experience, not doctrine. Jake continued arranging the fragments. The pattern emerged, slowly, deliberately. You built an empire on the idea that Velcor's strength is absolute, that your technology, your culture, your way of life is eternal and unchanging. It has served us well, Krent said, but his voice lacked conviction. Has it? Carla challenged. She pulled up holographic data on her wrist display. Your empire hasn't innovated in 300 cycles. Your ships use the same drives your great-grandparents used. Your weapons, your medicine, your agriculture, all stagnant. We perfected them, another advisor protested. Why change what works? Jake laughed, sharp and bitter. Because the universe doesn't care about your perfection. Ask the Drex. They're tearing through the outer systems with adaptive technology we've never seen before. How's your eternal unchanging empire handling that? The Velcor delegation shifted uncomfortably. The war with the Drex was going poorly for everyone, but the Velcor had suffered the worst losses. Entire fleets destroyed by weapons that evolved mid-battle. The Drex adapt, Seseth said softly. They change. They grow. Like we once did. Jake placed the final fragment. The completed pattern blazed with light, projecting a holographic image into the air above. It showed a young Velcor child holding a simple sphere, squeezing it until cracks appeared. But in the cracks, light poured out, brighter than the whole object had ever been. Your cub didn't break your most sacred relic, Jake said, standing. Your cub activated it. This was always meant to happen. The question is what you do next. Krenth stared at the hologram. His tendrils began moving again, slow and uncertain. The message says to leave it broken. But how does that help us? It doesn't help you, Carla said bluntly. It challenges you. Everything you built your identity on just shattered on your own council floor. You can either demand we glue it back together and pretend this never happened, or you can face what it means. Captain Brooks spoke for the first time, his command voice filling the chamber. The human race knows something about being broken. We've nearly destroyed ourselves half a dozen times. Climate collapse, nuclear war, genetic plagues, AI rebellions. Each time we thought we'd built something eternal, something perfect, and each time you broke, Krent said. And each time we rebuilt differently, Brooks countered. Better, stronger. Not because we were unchanging, but because we could change. Jake walked over to the Velcor cub, still trembling behind its parent. He knelt down to its eye level. Hey, what's your name? The cub looked at its parent, who gave a slight nod. Vekris, it whispered. Vekris, you didn't do anything wrong. You know that, right? The cub's tendrils quivered. I broke the eternal sphere. I ruined everything. No, Jake said firmly. You revealed the truth. That took more courage than keeping it whole ever did. Seseth approached slowly, lowering herself beside Vekris. The old text spoke of this, the breaking gift, when a cub's innocence reveals what adult wisdom has forgotten. Jake stood, facing Krenth directly. So here's my answer again. I won't fix your sphere. Not because I'm refusing to help, but because fixing it would be the cruelest thing I could do. It would tell young Vekris here that revealing uncomfortable truths is wrong, that preserving comfortable lies is more important than facing hard realities. The Alliance, Krenth said weakly. The Alliance needs honesty, Carla shot back. We're losing the war because both our species are too rigid. You won't adapt your tactics, and frankly, we've been too afraid of offending you to suggest alternatives. Admiral Helen Grant's voice cut through the chamber's comm system without warning. Morrison, you've got incoming. Drex Scout ships just breached the perimeter. 3 minutes out. The council chamber transformed instantly. Velcor guards activated energy shields while human marines flooded through the side entrances. Captain Brooks was already moving toward the command center. How many? He barked. 47 confirmed signatures, Grant responded. They're using that new dispersal pattern. Our targeting systems can't lock on. Jake grabbed his scanner and ran for the tactical display. Carla was right behind him, pulling up defensive protocols. The Velcor delegation stood paralyzed, watching their careful political dance dissolve into immediate survival. "Ambassador, your fleet positions?" Brooks demanded. Krenth finally moved, his tendrils flowing over a holographic interface. "Standard defensive formation. Ships holding perimeter at designated coordinates. Weapons charged. Shields at maximum." "They'll be useless," Jake said, his fingers flying across the scanner. "Look at the Drex approach vector. They're exploiting the gaps in your standard formation. They've seen it 1,000 times. Our formation is held for 200 cycles," a Velcor admiral protested through the comm. "It is mathematically optimal. It's mathematically predictable," Carla snapped. "Optimal for fighting enemies who don't learn. The Drex aren't those enemies." The chamber's main viewport flickered to life, showing the approaching swarm. The Drex ships moved like living things, flowing around each other in patterns that defied conventional tactics. Each vessel was different, modified, and evolved from battle to battle. 2 minutes, Grant warned. "Human fleet is repositioning, but we won't make it in time." Sesseth moved beside Jake, studying the display. "They are beautiful in a terrible way, like a living organism." "That's exactly what they are," Jake said. "Hive mind collective with distributed intelligence. Every ship learns from every other ship's experience. They adapt in real time." Krent's tendrils went rigid. "Then how do we fight them?" Jake turned to face the ambassador and something wild flickered in his eyes. "You don't. Not the way you've been trying. You can't outperfect a species that treats every battle as an evolution event." "Then we die," Kren said flatly. "Or you break formation," Carla said. "You adapt. You become unpredictable." The Velcor admiral's voice crackled with outrage. "Abandon our proven defensive strategy in the middle of an attack? That is madness. That's survival," Brooks said. "Morrison, you've got 90 seconds. What do you need?" Jake looked at the shattered fragments of the Eternal Sphere, still glowing on the council floor, then at young Vecrus, watching everything with wide, terrified eyes, then at the Drex swarm approaching like a wave of dissolution. "I need the Velcor to do something they haven't done in 300 cycles," he said. "I need them to improvise." Kren's translator emitted a sound like grinding metal. "You are asking us to abandon centuries of tactical doctrine based on a broken artifact and a human's intuition. I'm asking you to trust that your ancestors knew something you forgot." Jake grabbed the largest fragment, holding it up so the light blazed through the symbols. "Strength that cannot bend will always shatter. You've got 1 minute to decide if you believe that." The Drex ships crossed into weapons range. Velcor fleet commanders screamed for orders. Human vessels scrambled to intercept positions they'd never reach in time. Krenth looked at the fragment, at his cub, at Jake. "What do you propose?" Jake's grin was feral, something no tactical computer would ever suggest. Something crazy, desperate, and completely unprecedented. "I propose we win." He threw the tactical display into the center of the chamber, expanding it to full size. His hands moved with precision born from years of shipboard emergency repairs, not military training. "Velker 3rd Fleet. Break formation. Scatter into random vectors. Make yourselves unpredictable. That exposes our flanks," the Admiral protested. "You don't have flanks anymore," Carla said, taking over another console. "You have chaos." "Use it." Human vessels, find the gaps in their scatter pattern. Fill them, but don't hold position. Keep moving. "This violates every principle of coordinated defense," Kren said, but his manipulator limbs were already moving over his own interface. "Good," Jake said. "The Drex predict coordinated defense. They've evolved specifically to counter it. Give them something they've never seen." The swarm hit the defensive perimeter. Velker ships scattered like startled fish. Human vessels dove into the gaps, weapons blazing at angles no fire solution had ever calculated. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was completely, utterly wrong by every tactical manual ever written. And it was working. The Drex swarm hesitated, just for a microsecond, but Jake saw it. Their perfect adaptive formations stuttered, trying to process the chaos. "They're confused," Sesseth breathed. "The hive mind is attempting to find the pattern." There is no pattern, Brooks said, understanding flooding his face. That's the point. Humans spent centuries fighting each other. We got very good at creative chaos. Belcor's 7th Fleet reporting weapons impact. Grant's voice held shocked disbelief. Multiple Drex vessels destroyed. They're not adapting fast enough. Jake watched the tactical display transform into something that looked less like a battle and more like a storm. Ships moved on instinct and improvisation rather than predetermined coordinates. It was messy. It was inefficient. It was gloriously, devastatingly effective. Target their cluster nodes, Jake called out. The big ones trying to organize the others. Hit them hard, then break off before they adapt. Carla pulled up firing solutions that made the tactical AI scream warnings. These trajectories are insane. Collision probability off the charts. Good pilots won't collide, Jake said. Bad algorithms will. Krent was fully engaged now, his tendrils dancing across multiple interfaces. All fleet commanders, you are authorized for independent action. Use your judgment. Trust your instincts. Ignore the tactical computers. The Velcor Admiral's voice came back, shaking with either fear or exhilaration. Sir, this is unprecedented. Then make history, Krent commanded. Break everything we thought we knew. The Drex swarm fractured. Individual ships peeled away from the collective, their adaptive algorithms overwhelmed by input that defied every pattern they'd evolved to counter. Human and Velcor vessels pressed the advantage, striking from angles that changed moment to moment. They're retreating, Grant announced. Drex ships falling back to regroup coordinates. Don't let them, Jake said sharply. If they get time to process what just happened, they'll adapt. Keep the pressure on. Stay random. Lieutenant Danny Cruz's voice cut through from his fighter squadron. Morrison, we've got a problem. The Drex aren't just retreating. They're changing. Jake's blood went cold. On the tactical display, the Drex ships were transforming their formations mid-flight. Their hulls rippled with bioluminescent patterns, communicating faster than any electronic signal. They're learning, Carla said. Of course they are. That's what they do. How fast? Brooks demanded. Jake ran calculations on his scanner, 20 seconds before they've integrated our chaotic approach into their tactical matrix. Then they'll be able to predict randomness itself. That's impossible, Ceci said. Tell them that, Jake muttered, watching the Drex swarm begin to coalesce into something new, something that incorporated chaos into its own structure. Krent's tendrils went pale. We gave them a gift. We showed them how to beat us. No, Jake said, his mind racing. We showed them one adaptation. They think they've solved the problem. That's their weakness. What weakness? Brooks asked. They just learned chaos in 20 seconds. Jake started laughing, wild and slightly unhinged. Carla recognized that laugh. She'd heard it before. Right before Jake had suggested they vent their ship's entire fuel reserve to escape a gravitational anomaly. It was the laugh of someone about to do something spectacularly reckless. They didn't learn chaos, Jake said. They learned our chaos. They adapted to human unpredictability and Velcor improvisation. But there's something they haven't seen yet. What? Krenth demanded. A species that refuses to play the same game twice. Jake pulled up the communication channels to every ship in the combined fleet. All vessels, new orders. Stop fighting. The tactical channel erupted in confusion. Admiral Grant's voice cut through. Morrison, repeat that order. I don't think I heard correctly.
You heard perfectly. All ships cease fire.
Full stop. Hold position. Do absolutely nothing. That's suicide. The Velcor Admiral protested. The Drex will obliterate us. Maybe, Jake said. Or maybe they'll do exactly what their evolution has trained them to do. Carla, how long before the Drex reach firing range? 15 seconds? Perfect. Everyone hold steady. No evasive maneuvers. No weapons charging. Nothing. Brooks stepped beside Jake, his voice low. I hope you know what you're doing. I really don't, Jake admitted. But I know what they're doing. They're predators who've evolved to hunt moving prey. Let's see what happens when the prey stops running. The Drex swarm approached, their weapons systems glowing with lethal energy. Every human and Velcor crew member held their breath. Targeting alarms screamed across every ship. Weapons locks multiplied across the tactical display. 10 seconds. The Drex formation shifted, compensating for expected evasive maneuvers that never came. 5 seconds. Their swarm pattern destabilized slightly. Algorithms confused by targets that weren't behaving correctly. 3 seconds. Jake whispered into the comm. Now ask yourself the most important question evolution never prepared you for. If your enemy stops fighting, are they surrendering or are they smarter than you? The Drex ships passed through the fleet without firing a single shot. They sailed right past, their targeting systems locked on positions the human and Velcor ships were supposed to have moved to. Their weapons discharged at empty space, at coordinates their predictive algorithms had calculated with perfect mathematical precision, coordinates that assumed their prey would follow the pattern. Any pattern, even a chaotic one. All ships, Jake said, calmly. Fire at will. The combined fleet opened up at point-blank range. The Drex swarm, locked into attack vectors aimed at empty space, flew directly into a killing field. Explosions bloomed across the viewport like deadly flowers. "Target their command nodes!" Carla called out, her fingers dancing across weapon targeting. "The big ones are trying to signal a retreat. Velcor fleet, dimensional shift on my mark," Krenth commanded, his voice steady now. "Human vessels, maintain firing positions. Mark." Half the Velcor ships vanished, reappearing behind the Drex formation. The swarm found itself surrounded, caught between two firing lines, their adaptive algorithms trying to process a tactical situation that violated every principle of engagement they'd evolved to counter. "They're breaking up," Lieutenant Cruz reported. "Drex ships scattering, individual vessels fleeing in all directions." "Let them go," Jake said quietly. "They need to report back. They need to tell the rest of the Drex Collective what happened here." Brooks looked at him sharply. "Why would we want that?" "Because," Jake said, watching the surviving Drex ships jump to faster-than-light speeds, "the next time they face us, they'll remember that humans and Velcor are unpredictable. They'll adapt their tactics to account for that. They'll build in redundancies and fallback positions. They'll make their swarms even more sophisticated." "And that helps us how?" Grant asked. Jake's smile was cold, because they'll be preparing for opponents who use tactics and strategy. They'll never see it coming. When we decide tactics and strategy are for people who play by rules, humans don't have rules. We have suggestions we ignore when they're inconvenient. Sesseth made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. It took Jake a moment to realize she was laughing. "The breaking gift," she said. "You fight by breaking. Not just formations or ships, but expectations. The very concept of how warfare should work." "We fight dirty," Carla said simply. "We always have. It's kind of our thing." The tactical display cleared. No more Drex signatures. The immediate threat had passed. Around the chamber, Velcor and human crew members slowly released breaths they'd been holding. Krenth approached Jake, his tendrils moving in patterns that the translator struggled to interpret. "You risked everything on a theory, on intuition, on hope." "I risked everything on being human," Jake corrected. "We're really good at making things up as we go along." Young Vecris stepped forward, looking up at Jake with something like awe. "You broke the battle, like I broke the sphere." Jake knelt down again, meeting the cub's eyes. "Exactly like that. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is shatter what everyone says should stay whole." The council chamber remained silent for exactly 3 seconds before Ambassador Krent's senior military advisor, Commander Thraxis, slammed his manipulator limbs against the floor. The sound echoed like gunshots. "This proves nothing," Therax snarled. "One battle, one lucky improvisation. The human got fortunate." Jake didn't even look at him. Ooh. He was studying the tactical aftermath, his scanner processing debris patterns and energy signatures. Something didn't add up. "Carla, pull up the Drex retreat vectors," he said quietly. She frowned but complied. The holographic display shifted, showing the escape trajectories of the surviving Drex vessels. They'd scattered in 43 different directions, seemingly random. "They're regrouping," Thraxis continued. "They'll adapt. They'll return with countermeasures to every trick you used today. Then what? More improvisation? More chaos? That is not strategy. That is desperation. He's right, Seseth said softly. Everyone turned to stare at her. The elderly Velkor's tendrils hung limp with exhaustion. The Drex will learn. They always do. What worked today will fail tomorrow. Jake finally looked up from his scanner. His expression made Carla tense. She'd seen that look before. Right before he'd discovered the fuel leak that should have killed them all 3 years ago. They're not regrouping, Jake said. What? Brooke stepped closer to the display. The retreat vectors. They're not random. Look, Jake highlighted the trajectories, extending them through star charts. Each ship is heading to a different Drex-controlled system. They're spreading out. Standard dispersal protocol, Thraxis said dismissively. They're protecting their assets. They're broadcasting, Carla breathed, understanding flooding her face. Oh, God. They're teaching. Jake nodded grimly. Every ship that escaped is a mobile library. They're racing to different Drex populations to share what they learned. By tomorrow, every Drex vessel in 50 systems will know exactly what happened here. The chamber went deathly quiet. Then we didn't win, Krent said. We educated our enemy. No, Jake said, something fierce blazing in his eyes. We did something better. We scared them. He pulled up communication logs from the battle, running them through translation matrices. The Drex didn't use language the way other species did. They communicated through chemical signals and electromagnetic pulses, a form of expression that was part emotion, part data transfer. Look at the signal patterns from their command nodes right before they retreated. They weren't calculating tactics. They were experiencing something the Drex Collective hasn't felt in 300 cycles of expansion. What? Seseth asked. Doubt? Jake played the signals through an audio converter. The sound that emerged was discordant, fractured, wrong. The Drex hive mind is built on certainty, adaptation through predictable evolution, action and reaction, cause and effect. They've conquered 40 species because they can out-evolve any tactical approach. But we didn't give them a tactical approach, Brooks said slowly. We gave them nonsense, Carla finished. We gave them chaos that became order that became chaos again. We broke their fundamental understanding of how conflict works. Jake pulled up more data, his hands shaking slightly. The Drex are spreading this information because they have to. Their entire species needs to process what happened. They need the collective consciousness to analyze and adapt. But here's the thing about humans that no alien species ever seems to understand. He turned to face the full assembly. Human and Velcor alike, we are not consistent. We are not predictable. We are 7 billion individual consciousnesses who can't even agree on what pizza toppings are acceptable. The Drex think they can adapt to humanity by studying one battle. They think we're a problem that can be solved. And we're not, Therix challenged. We're a paradox wrapped in chaos and held together by spite, Jake said flatly. The Drex will spend the next month analyzing what we did today. They'll build perfect countermeasures. They'll create formations specifically designed to handle random, unpredictable attacks, combined with coordinated improvisation. Then we've given them the tools to destroy us, Krent said. We've given them the tools to fight the version of us they met today, Jake corrected. Unfortunately for them, that version doesn't exist anymore. By the time they've adapted, we'll be doing something completely different. Something we probably haven't even thought of yet. Something that will make today's tactics look sane and reasonable by comparison. Lieutenant Danny Cruz's voice came through the comm, uncertain. Morrison, are you saying we won by convincing them we're insane? I'm saying we won by being ourselves, Jake replied. The Drex are a hive mind, one consciousness distributed across billions of bodies. They think in unison. They adapt in unison. They can't comprehend a species where every individual is essentially running their own unique operating system with minimal coordination. Seseth approached the holographic display, her movements slow with age and thought. The ancient texts spoke of this, the Chaos Doctrine. Before we became Empire, when we were still world-bound, we had philosophers who studied the nature of conflict. And, Krent prompted, They concluded that the most dangerous opponent is not the strongest or the smartest. It is the one who cannot be understood, the one who defies categorization. Seseth's tendrils traced patterns in the air. We abandoned that philosophy when we reached the stars. We decided predictability was strength. Consistency was power. You decided wrong, Jake said, not unkindly. The universe rewards adaptability, not rigidity. The Drex know that better than anyone. They've built an entire civilization on constant evolution. But they made one critical mistake. What mistake? Vekris asked, the cub's voice small but clear. Jake smiled at the young Velcor. They assumed evolution has rules. They thought if they adapted fast enough, changed quickly enough, they could counter any threat. But human evolution isn't biological. It's cultural, mimetic. We can change our entire approach to warfare between breakfast and lunch because someone had a weird dream or watched an old movie or remembered a stupid joke. That's not evolution, Therasis protested. That's madness. That's survival, Brooks said quietly. Commander, how many species have gone extinct trying to outlogic humanity? How many alien civilizations have created perfect strategies to defeat us, only to discover we'd already moved on to something new? Theraxis didn't answer. Captain Alan Brooks pulled up historical records on his command tablet. The Kree hegemony spent 50 years developing the ultimate counter to human naval tactics. By the time they deployed it, humanity had abandoned traditional naval warfare entirely and switched to drone swarms controlled by competitive gamers. The Silex Confederation built a psychological warfare program designed to exploit human emotional instability. We turned it into performance art and sold tickets. Jake walked to the center of the chamber, stepping carefully around the scattered fragments of the eternal sphere. He picked up the piece containing the brightest symbols and held it toward the light streaming through the viewport. Your ancestors understood something you forgot, he said, addressing Krenth but speaking to every Velcor in the room. They understood that permanence is a lie, that perfection is a trap, that the moment you believe you've reached the pinnacle, you've already started dying. Krenth's tendrils moved in slow, contemplative patterns. The breaking gift. You believe this applies to more than just the sphere. I know it does, Jake said. The Drex are spreading information about today's battle right now. By next week, they'll have countermeasures. By next month, they'll have evolved an entirely new tactical framework designed to handle human chaos and Velcor improvisation working together. Then we've lost, Theraxis said bitterly. We've won, Carla corrected, because next month we won't be the same species they're preparing for. Humans will have invented 6 new ways to fight that we'll use once and never repeat, and the Velcor will either join us in that insanity or get left behind. Seseth made that wind chime sound again. You are offering us a choice. Return to our eternal, unchanging doctrine and face extinction, or embrace the breaking gift and survive through constant transformation. I'm not offering anything, Jake said. I'm telling you what's already happening. The sphere broke. The battle broke. Your perfect formations broke. The question isn't whether things will keep breaking. The question is whether you'll fight that reality or use it. Young Vekris stepped forward, moving past its parent to stand beside Jake. The cub's tendrils were steady now, no longer trembling. I want to learn to break things on purpose, like the humans do. Krenth looked at his offspring, something shifting in his expression. That is not the Velcor way. It was, Seseth said gently. Once, long ago, we were explorers, inventors, dreamers. We broke ourselves apart and rebuilt constantly. Then we achieved empire and decided we were finished growing. Finished dying, you mean, Jake said. The moment a species stops changing is the moment it starts its countdown to extinction. The Drex understand that. They've built their entire civilization on it. The only reason they haven't wiped out every other species in the galaxy is because most civilizations are too predictable to be worth the effort. But humans are different, Brooks added. We're annoying. We refuse to stay solved. Every time someone figures us out, we reinvent ourselves just to be contrary. Krenth approached the scattered fragments, studying them as if seeing them for the first time. If we embrace this philosophy, we lose everything that makes us Velcor. Our traditions, our protocols, Our identity. You lose a version of being Velcor, Jake said, and you become something new. Something that might actually survive what's coming. What is coming? Krenth asked. Jake pulled up star charts on the tactical display, highlighting Drek's expansion patterns. They're not just fighting us. They're testing us. Every battle is an evolution event for them. They're determining which species are worth absorbing into their collective and which are worth eliminating entirely. Right now, they can't figure out which category humanity falls into. And the Velcor? Theraxis demanded. They had you filed under elimination until about an hour ago, Carla said bluntly. Your perfect, predictable tactics made you easy to categorize, easy to counter, easy to eventually destroy. But now? Sesseth asked. Now they don't know what you are, Jake said. You scattered. You improvised. You broke formation and won. The Drex Collective is probably having the equivalent of an existential crisis trying to process Velcor vessels acting like human chaos merged with disciplined coordination. Krenth's tendrils moved in complex patterns, emotions the translator couldn't capture. Finally, he spoke. What you are asking is not a tactical adjustment. It is a fundamental transformation of our species' identity. Yes, Jake said simply. And if we refuse? Jake set down the crystal fragment and met the ambassador's gaze. Then in 50 cycles, maybe 100, the Drex will have fully adapted to human unpredictability. They'll develop countermeasures to chaos itself. And when that happens, they'll need to test those countermeasures on someone predictable. Someone still using the old perfect formations. Someone who never learned to break. The silence stretched. Outside the viewport, human and Velcor ships held position, crews waiting for orders that would determine the future of two species. Vakris picked up one of the smaller fragments, turning it in small manipulator limbs. If I learn to break things the right way, will the symbols always appear? Jake knelt beside the cub. No. Sometimes breaking things just makes a mess. Sometimes it reveals truth. Sometimes it creates something new. You never know until after. That's what makes it terrifying and necessary. I am not afraid, Vakris said. Krenth looked at his offspring, then at the shattered sphere, then at Jake. Something ancient and new moved behind his eyes. Council is adjourned, he announced. All fleet commanders maintain defensive positions but prepare for tactical doctrine revision. Effective immediately, all ships are authorized for creative interpretation of engagement protocols. Terex jerked upright. Ambassador, you cannot mean... I mean exactly that, Krenth said firmly. The eternal sphere broke. Let it remain broken. Let it remind us that nothing is eternal. Not our enemy's tactics. Not our own doctrine. Not even ourselves. He turned to Jake. The human Morrison is correct. We have a choice. Cling to what we were and die perfect, or embrace change and survive imperfect. I choose survival. Jake grinned. Welcome to Chaos, Ambassador. Fair warning, it doesn't get easier. Just more interesting. Good, Krenth said, and for the first time his translator captured something that sounded like genuine amusement. I was growing bored with easy. Brooks pulled up fleet-wide communications. All vessels stand down from combat alert. Prepare for joint tactical review with Velcor Command. We've got a war to win, and apparently we're gonna do it by making things up as we go. Admiral Grant's voice came back dry and amused. So business as usual for humanity, then. Business as usual, Brooks confirmed. Jake picked up the largest fragment one final time, studying the symbols that would remain visible now. Leave it broken, he read aloud. Not because breaking is good, but because sometimes the cracks are where the light gets in. Sesseth approached, her movements slow but deliberate. There is an old Velcor blessing. May you break perfectly and rebuild beautifully. I like that, Jake said. So do I, Krenth said. Perhaps it is time we remembered it. Outside, the stars turned. The Drex Collective processed impossible data. Two species stood together, learning to fight not with perfection but with beautiful, terrifying chaos. And somewhere in the depths of space, the universe itself smiled at the audacity of creatures who refused to stay broken or whole, choosing instead the constant transformation between the two. The war was far from over, but for the first time in cycles, it felt winnable. How it